Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, I want to look at a map. And I want you to close your eyes for a second, unless you're driving, of course, please don't. But imagine you're walking through a town on the north coast of Jamaica.
It's hot, it's humid, you can smell the salt in the air.
Right. You're in a place called Falmouth. And the first thing that hits you isn't the palm trees or the ocean. It's the rhythm of the streets. You're walking and you realize everything is perfect.
Right angles.
Perfect right angles.
Yeah.
Broad, straight avenues. And you see these Georgian facades that look like they were just airlifted from 18th century London and dropped right into the tropics.
Oh.
It feels incredibly deliberate.
That is the perfect word for it. Deliberate. Because what you're looking at isn't some quaint little village that just happened to grow over time. It wasn't organic at all.
Right. And that's the hook for today. Based on the archives and architectural studies we've gone through, the whole premise is this. Falmouth was basically an 18th century startup city.
It really was.
It was a machine, a piece of hardware designed for one single purpose: efficiency. So our mission today is to unpack how a town founded in 1769 became this model of industrial ambition.
And we're going to explore this idea of infrastructure as policy.
A phrase I absolutely love. And we'll get into how, in a weird twist, the town's eventual economic failure is the only reason we can still see it today.
It's a fascinating case study in what you could call the geometry of empire. When you walk those streets, you aren't just seeing buildings, you're seeing a belief system basically etched into the earth.
The British belief that if you control the space,
You control the commerce.
So let's unpack this. To understand why Falmouth even exists, we have to get into the problem it was trying to solve, because people don't just, build cities for fun. We need to go back to 1769.
Context is absolutely everything here. By 1769, Jamaica is no longer some experimental frontier. It's matured. It is one of Britain's most valuable assets.
And the driver of that value, the absolute king of the economy, is sugar.
Sugar, molasses, and rum, the Holy Trinity.
Exactly. And the parish where Falmouth is located, Trelawney, was the engine room for all of this. It was overflowing with product.
You had these massive estates producing thousands of hogsheads of sugar every single year.
Okay, stop there. Hogsheads. I love that word, but we need to define it. We're not talking about a little bag of sugar for your coffee here.
No, not at all. A hogshead is this massive barrel, and depending on the standard of the day, when it was filled with wet sugar, it could weigh over 1,000 pounds.
Wow.
So moving just one of these is a serious project. Moving thousands of them is an industrial nightmare.
And they all had to go somewhere. They had to get off the island and over to England to get paid.
And this is where the bottleneck happened. The nearest major port was Montego Bay. And from all the historical accounts, Montego Bay in the mid-1700s was, well, it was a mess.
The logistical heart attack.
It was a victim of its own success. I mean, picture this. Roads just jammed with ox carts that can't move. Warehouses are spilling into the streets because there's no storage left.
And ships are just sitting in the harbor.
Ships waiting in queues for weeks just to get near a wharf. It sounds like a modern supply chain crisis, really.
It sounds exactly like what happened to the ports a few years ago.
It's the same dynamic. And for the planters in Trelawney, that chaos was costing them a fortune. Time is money. Time sitting in traffic or waiting for a ship is just lost profit.
So, enter the power players. We have to talk about Edward Barrett and John Tharp.
These are the names you see all over the land deeds. And it's so important not to think of them as just farmers. These weren't guys in overalls with a pitchfork.
No, they were the tech billionaires of their day.
In a sense, yeah. They were industrial capitalists. They were managing these huge multinational supply chains. They had massive capital political influence.
And they looked at the mess in Montego Bay and thought, this isn't fixable.
Right. Patching it up wasn't going to work. They didn't want to fix the potholes. They wanted a whole new highway.
Huh. That's a great way to put it.
They understood that efficiency was the new measure of power. So they petitioned the colonial officials, put up their own land and capital, and said, we want a harbor of our own, one designed from scratch.
And that's what I meant by startup city. Falmouth wasn't a frontier outpost where people just threw up some shacks. It was a statement. It was a planned community before that was even a buzzword.
Which brings us to the design. If you look at a map of Falmouth from that era, and the maps are surprisingly accurate, you see that geometry of empire immediately.
The grid.
The grid. Surveyors came in and just carved the town into a perfect grid. But it wasn't just about straight lines to look tidy. It was about scale.
How so?
The streets in Falmouth were significantly wider than pretty much any other Caribbean port of the day.
And there was a very specific, very practical reason for that, wasn't there?
Traffic management. They literally designed the streets to be wide enough for ox carts to pass in both directions.
That is actually pretty revolutionary for the time. It's like inventing the two-lane highway.
It really is. In older ports, streets were narrow, winding. If two carts met, you had a jam, arguments, delays. In Falmouth, the design ensures the sugar keeps moving. It's all about throughput.
And then there's the visibility aspect. These sources say the straight lines let administrators see from one end of a street to the other.
That's the surveillance element. We have to remember this was a colony built on a very rigid hierarchy and, of course, enslaved labor. The layout allowed for visual control.
You could see who was moving where.
Exactly. It minimized the hidden spaces in the city. It's a little chilling when you think about it that way. The architecture itself is watching you.
Infrastructure is never neutral.
It rarely is. And look at where they placed the key buildings. The warehouses weren't just scattered around. They flanked the waterfront, positioned so cargo could move from cart to ship with what the archives call mechanical precision.
And the customs house and the market were placed to strictly regulate everything.
Right. This is that idea of infrastructure as policy. The orderliness wasn't vanity. It was a very British belief that if you impose order on the physical space, you impose order on the commerce itself.
You minimize theft, delay, rot.
All of it. It's a living system designed to maximize profit. Even the construction materials played into this. You start to see a lot of brick and stone used alongside the timber.
Which is just smart, given the two biggest threats are fire and hurricanes.
Correct. And they built these commercial buildings with shared walls, creating these really sturdy, unified rows. It's almost defensive architecture, a fortress for their inventory.
So we have this grid, wide streets, a machine for moving sugar. But this is where it gets really interesting. Because you might assume, okay, it's the 18th century, it's a port town, it must be smelly, dirty, unsanitary.
That would be the standard assumption, for sure. Most cities were filthy.
But Falmouth pulls a fast one on us.
This is one of the most surprising statistics in our whole deep dive. In 1799, Falmouth became one of the first towns in the entire Western Hemisphere to have piped running water. 1799. That is just... It's incredibly early. We're talking about a time when major European capitals were still dealing with open sewers. New York City didn't have a reliable public water system until decades after that.
It's remarkable. They built a massive aqueduct from the Martha Brae River.
Which is a beautiful river, by the way. If you ever visit, you have to go rafting there.
It is. And they used a Persian wheel to lift the water, which was cutting-edge tech, and ran wooden pipes from the river to deliver fresh water to fountains and directly into the homes of the wealthy.
That's a level of engineering that is just mind-blowing for a colonial outpost. And it wasn't just about drinking water, was it?
No, it was about the whole ecosystem of the town. They treated hygiene as a form of engineering. The streets were well graded.
Graded, meaning what?
Angled specifically.
Yeah.
So that when those massive tropical downpours hit, and in Jamaica when it rains, it really rains, the water just drained away quickly.
So they had waste channels to carry all that runoff away. Exactly, because mud and standing water are bad for business. They slow down carts, they breed mosquitoes, they spread disease. Falmouth was designed to be a showcase of modernity.
A showcase of modernity. I love that. It really challenges the stereotype of the chaotic colonial port. It sounds more like almost like a Singapore of its day.
That's a very apt comparison, a planned logistics hub. And we have to talk about the people actually navigating this machine.
Yeah, who was living there?
It was a pretty diverse population. You had the British merchants, of course, but you also had a really significant population of free people of color, craftsmen, artisans, and, of course, the massive population of enslaved laborers whose hands powered every single movement of goods.
And the sources mention this interesting cultural loop. Ships would leave with sugar, go to England, and come back with manufactured goods. But they also came back with ideas.
Specifically books, architecture pattern books.
Right, and those books inspired the details on the buildings. So you have this Caribbean port keeping up with the latest Georgian fashion trends from London.
But it was all interpreted by local craftsmen. So you see local limestone, tropical hardwoods, cooling louvers. It created this unique Caribbean Georgian style.
So let's just pause and look at the scorecard here. For a few decades, Falmouth is on top of the world. It's efficient, clean, rich, modern, the Silicon Valley of sugar.
It is the absolute peak of the curve. Everything is working just as it was designed to.
But there was always a but in these stories.
Well, the only constant in history is change. The same global currents that lifted Falmouth up eventually started to shift.
And this brings us to the big twist.
Yeah.
Because if you look at a map of global shipping hubs today, Falmouth is not on it. So what happened?
Two main things. One was social and economic, and the other was technological. And they hit at roughly the same time.
Okay, let's start with the social shift.
The abolition of the slave trade in 1807, and then full emancipation in the 1830s. That just fundamentally transformed the later system that the whole sugar economy relied on.
So the engine that drove the production of all those hogsheads of sugar, it changed.
Right. The volume of trade starts to fluctuate, the economy has to reorient itself, the whole why of the city starts to wobble. But then technology comes in with the knockout punch.
The steam engine.
The great disruptor of the 19th century.
It's hard to overstate how much this changed everything.
Completely. For centuries, trade relied on sailing ships. Falmouth Harbor was perfect for them. It was sheltered, accessible. But steamships, they're bigger, heavier, they have iron hulls, they sit much lower in the water.
They have a deep draft.
Exactly. They require deep harbors.
And Falmouth
Has a shallow bay. And it's not just shallow, it's full of coral heads and complex ecology.
There it is, the fatal flaw. The geography that made it safe for small wooden ships made it impossible for the big iron ones.
It couldn't expand. It couldn't be easily dredged to accommodate these massive new vessels.
But Kingston could.
Kingston had the deep water. It had the capacity. So the center of gravity it shifted. Kingston adapted to the steam age. Falmouth couldn't.
So it wasn't a fire or a war that ended its reign. It was just depth.
Geography is destiny. But here's the amazing thing, and this is why we can walk through that beautiful town today. The decline was gentle. It wasn't a catastrophe.
It wasn't Pompeii. It didn't burn to the ground.
No. Trade just slowed down. The money dried up. The ships stopped calling as often. And because the economic boom ended, there was no reason to tear anything down.
That is the ultimate irony of preservation, isn't it? Poverty preserves.
Precisely. If Falmouth had remained the economic hub of Jamaica, just imagine what would have happened in the 20th century.
Oh, total redevelopment. Those Georgian buildings would have been bulldozed for skyscrapers, parking
Concrete office blocks.
Right.
But because the boom ended, that 18th century plan survived. Nobody had the money to bulldoze it, and nobody had a reason to change it.
So the town was basically frozen in amber.
The bones remained, the streets, the drains, the stone houses, they were just left exactly as they were.
So let's take that visual tour. If you go there today, you aren't seeing ruins, you're seeing a functioning town. What are the key landmarks that tell this story?
Well, you have St. Peter's Anglican Church, built in 1795. It's this massive stone building anchoring the skyline. It just screams, we are here to stay, even if the economy wasn't.
And then you have the symbol of civic power.
The old courthouse, that was the symbol of Trelawney's administrative peak. It's where the laws were enforced, where the order was maintained, a very imposing structure.
And my favorites, the counting houses.
The commercial bones. These are the buildings where sugar was converted into credit on the London Exchange. You can almost hear the scratching of quills in the ledgers.
It's incredible. It's like a fossil of an entire economic system.
It is.
So let's zoom out. What does this all mean? We've looked at the rise, the design, the innovation, and the fall.
I think the key takeaway is that Falmouth is actually a story of endurance, not failure.
How so? Because economically, it definitely failed compared to Kingston.
True. But structurally, it shows how vision and adaptation coexist. It was a town born of this intense ambition to be the most efficient port possible. And even though the empire and the technology changed, the town itself, it outlasted all of that.
The careful design survived, long after the ship stopped coming.
There's a quote from one of the architectural reviews in our source stack that I think sums this up perfectly. It says, "Infrastructure is the skeleton of history. While the flesh of trade may wither, the bones define the shape of what remains."
Wow. The flesh of trade may wither, but the bones define the shape of what remains. That's beautiful.
It really is. It reminds us that what we build today, our roads, our grids, they tell a story that lasts longer than the economy that paid for them. Falmouth proves that good bones last.
Which leads us to a bit of a provocative thought to leave you with.
Yeah.
We talked about Falmouth as a startup city. Today we talk about smart cities, tech hubs. We are obsessed with optimizing our own cities.
We are. We pour concrete and lay fiber optics with the same enthusiasm they had for stone and aqueducts.
So, if the economic engine of today, whether that's big tech or finance or whatever, drives your city, if that disappeared tomorrow, if the flesh of trade withered away, what bones would remain?
That's the question. What parts of our modern infrastructure would actually survive for 250 years? And maybe more importantly, what story would those ruins tell future archaeologists about what we valued most?
Would they see wide avenues designed for connection? Or would they see something else?
Would they see walls, public spaces? It kind of changes how you look at the construction crane down the street.
Absolutely. Something to mull over as you walk through your own city today. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.